This sounds okay.
I can hear you beautiful. Welcome to the Eric Tries Too Hard podcast, episode 111, with stand-up comedian, comedy writer, and co-creator of the Hard Times. Is it .net?
It's .net. We it took us a while to get it, but we got that .net, baby.
Beautiful. No .ca for us. We didn't have to go abroad. Or for you, my tangible or my slight tangent of contributions to the site. Anyway, I'm here with Bill Conway. Very happy to have him. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing well. Good to be here. Great to be on board.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a mediocre deal, but that's in my world anyway. But yeah, so typically I have one of two types of guests on this podcast. I have ones who are in the majority of people I have on are in the throes of trying to make it, trying to figure out what's going to be their niche, what's going to be their, and then I have other guests, which is more rare, and you fall into that category where you have an incredible thing that you're working on that's getting very established, and not only that, but you have some really interesting. I don't just you in and of itself. I don't have to sell you to an audience. You are like already very well established, and so what I wanted to do is kind of, if you're okay with it, kind of bring back to how all this came to be. We don't have to tell the Hard Times story. You actually had a great interview with the Saint-Cohn brothers on a past guest of this podcast, Jesse Cannon's podcast. And if anyone wants to hear an amazing history of how that came to be, definitely check out his podcast, Off the Record. But how you yourself got into punk rock and hardcore, how you got into comedy, and all of that. Is that okay? If we just
absolutely.
Jump in?
Yeah, let's
Beautiful.
do it.
Yeah, go for it.
With the comedy is one of those things that came later. Like the punk and hardcore thing. That was just got a skateboard at age 12, and then I have talked about it with people before. You go one of two ways. You either go hip hop or you go punk, and I went the punk way, despite the fact that I was wearing gigantic pants at the time.
I wore Jinko and Fubu at the same time.
Like one pair over the other.
Yeah, exactly, pretty much.
Yeah. So with that, getting into skateboarding, getting your skateboard magazines and flipping to the back where they have reviews of albums and stuff like that. And then I had an older cousin that was into, punk. It was this weird time where he was into hardcore bands like Warzone and stuff like that for like a 6-month window of his life. And he was also like straight edge for the 6-month window. And that 6-month window, like, I paid attention to. And then he started to get it, like, I feel like there's this logical progression of like when you're in 5th and 6th grade, you might listen to new metal, but then you want to listen to like something you like heavy, but you're like, maybe you keep following down the road of new metal and you just become a huge like System of a Down fan. Or you find other things like, oh, what's heavier than this? What's better than this? And then you go to like punk and hardcore. And he went the opposite way where he just got more new metal. And then I went, towards the punk and kept skateboarding, and he started smoking weed and becoming that sort of guy.
But System of a Down fan as the end progression of the new metal, that is the most polite that you're given a lot of for that kind of thing. I definitely, wow, way to middle of the road, beautiful. That's quite a compliment for, yeah. How old are you?
I'm going to be, well, I mean, a lady never really likes to tell, but I will be 32. Yeah, I'll be 32 in 2 months. So yeah, just about to exit my prime. So
I like to know that I'm 2 years younger than you, or like 1.5, whatever that ends up being. And I like to know that because I like to kind of know what period of alternative culture you come from. So when you say the new metal in middle school, I'm like, oh, me too. I totally recall Freak on a Leash being a thing you canceled school for. That was a very big deal, that video. So you started down that road. You got into skateboarding and continued on. What was the progression of the punk bands that you were into? Because I know there's the singer of Leftover Crack has a great thing where he says like bands like Green Day. He does it like, and we'll talk about straight edge in a little bit if that's cool. But he talks about like punk rock, like drugs, where you get into it like, oh, your daiquiri you're sipping, that's your Green Day or your Good Charlotte, and then you get into the harder and harder stuff until you wind up with nausea and crass, and then you're full blown. What was kind of your progression? Pardon the metaphor.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of it varies because I had that cousin that I mentioned that was into bands like Victory Records band. So at that time, that was right around Victory Style 1 when that comp came out. So you had your Earth Crisis and Warzone, Strife, Integrity, all these bands on that, and that was my initial introduction into that scene. But I didn't latch on to all those bands right away. Like Warzone, The Sound of Revolution was the first hardcore CD I owned, which I still own. It's like, well, good. I didn't embarrass myself, whatever your opinions of Warzone is, but I do remember I started getting into the Guttermouth type punk, like
I was literally going to bring up Guttermouth. Yeah. This is my version of that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Like the Vandals, Guttermouth, like those appeal to the 8th grade, mentality where they're sort of funny, but in reality they're not that funny. Like they think they're hilarious. And when you're in 8th grade,
I was literally thinking here, I was like, I don't want to bash Guttermouth, but what if he likes Guttermouth? But yeah, Guttermouth is that. That's my embarrassment of getting into like that song Lipstick. I'm like, yeah, mom and dad, screw you.
I mean, that song right there, I don't care who you are. If you were a 7th or 8th grade boy, you listen to that, that song is great because it's just against your parents, and just like, fuck parents. It's like, I love my mother, but like that song, I know every lyric to. I haven't listened to it in 15 years. I could still sing every lyric to that song, no problem. And yeah, so, but there was this, like I've mentioned it on my podcast, Edgeland, very briefly, that when I was in 8th grade, I asked for 2 CDs for Christmas. One was Guttermouth Musical Monkey, and one was Minor Threat, the complete discography. And my mother got me Minor Threat, and I'm so happy. But at the time, I opened it up and was like, shit, I wanted Guttermouth, But I now have 2 Minor Threat tattoos and 0 Guttermouth tattoos. So,
thanks, Mom. You'll understand. She told you you'll understand when you're older.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did have like that era of punk, and then you sort of like, it was like I think if you're 30 or, we still had the days before the internet where we're discovering music, like just before it. And so I don't even remember how I heard about Black Flag or the Dead Kennedys. Like a friend must have told me about those. So I bought those CDs and remembered being like, I don't like this, but it will grow on
really?
me. Yeah, like,
okay,
it was like,
gotcha. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to let it grow on me, and like, because Jello Biafra's vocals are just so weird,
My friend gave me a mixed CD with like, it was like Guttermouth, Casualties, Clash, then it was like Dead Kennedys, Crass, and I like literally listened in that order. I was like, I can't go past this track, and then 6 months later, I'd be like, okay, I can listen to some more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so eventually, as soon as I developed the ear for it, like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys were like, oh hell yeah, and then it just kind of developed from there. Like, and up until I was 16, I don't think I listened to anything but punk and hardcore. For that like 3 years, I didn't think I was allowed to listen to anything else. Like, she's like, well,
if friends do like with me, they didn't tell you could. They're like, you can't listen to anything else.
Yeah, it's like, oh wait, I can listen to stuff that isn't just scream. Like, I can listen to something more subdued. That's okay. Like, all right. Yeah, and the band that like broke me out of that was this band Engine Down from Virginia. They were a post-hardcore band. I don't even know what I don't even know what that genre is, but yeah, in that band kind of made it so it's like, oh yeah, I can listen to all sorts of music now. And now I don't listen to any music. I just listen to podcasts. That's
so I've had a handful of Hard Times writers and obviously Hard Times co-creator on the podcast, and I end up relating just like I did when I first saw the site, and I thought no one's going to like this but me and my 10 buddies are going to think this is the greatest thing in the world because it's so niche, but obviously there's a huge audience for it. It connects with so many people, and every time I have somebody on who writes, I connect with that, and like that's exactly what it is. I have not listened to music since I got into podcasting and comedy, like or at least the way I used to. You had that progression of you got into some like actual quality, and honestly, like with Minor Threat, it's not it's not super easily digestible. It's not like a Green Day album or something that a lot of people would get into and then just, you know, travel down that path. So the fact that you still kind of had to go through the process of that acquired taste of getting to those like harder punk bands. Also, I like how you mentioned post-punk or post-hardcore. It's like, what do you even describe it as? That genre, those post-genres are weird. I told my brother-in-law, who's not in alternative culture at all, I told him there's this band that they were post-punk. And he was like, yeah, isn't every band after 1979? And he wasn't joking. He was like, that doesn't make any sense. Right, so that was kind of your progression getting into to the music of it, and I understand that you know has, I'm sure, still evolved over time. Now, when it comes to comedy, what was the first memory you had, not necessarily of doing comedy or writing, but the first time, whether it's stand-up or just comedy in general, that first kind of moment in your life where you realized, oh, this is different than other forms of entertainment. This speaks to me on a level, even long before you did it. Do you have like a moment like that you can recall?
Yeah, it's pretty easy too. I mean, there's two distinct ones. If you're talking straight stand-up comedy, that were the first time I really saw it, and like was my socks were knocked off, and I was like, that is the funniest thing, because you'd always been exposed to it. And it's embarrassing to say this now. It's not even embarrassing, because I know so many people relate to this. It just doesn't hold up. Dane Cook's first 30-minute special.
Yep. Yes. That with the rock band set in the background.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
I relate.
mugging to the camera, but like he's all energy. There's punchlines, I guess, but it's 100% energy. You watch it again. I tried watching it again, and I couldn't get through the first 10 minutes of it.
Not the snake bit. You couldn't do him doing a snake as a girl at the bar. That's not doing it.
But like he was the first guy, and I know it was a lot of people because of his popularity on social media soon thereafter. You know, it was obvious he was lightning in a bottle at that point, but that was the first time where stand-up comedy was like, oh, I need to start looking at more stand-up comedy. And then like, if that's 1A is Louis C.K.'s first hour special for HBO, where this was still 6 years before I did comedy or even did my first open mic. I had my friend Anthony Hook, who we were living in Boston, and I was over his apartment, and he had it, and he's like, this is the funniest thing I have ever seen in my life. And with that setup, I was like, well, I'm not going to enjoy this now. You have hyped it too much. Like, I'm going to watch this I'm not going to enjoy it as much. And it was so funny that it was like, please pause it. I'm laughing too hard that I think I'm going to die. Like my lungs can't get air quick enough. I'm falling, like it was like falling off the couch, sort of funny. And then like I went back to my apartment and showed all my roommates, and was like, that's the funniest thing ever. And like those two things like solidified, you know, like stand-up comedy is this great thing. And it was, you know, I'd always enjoyed comedy that's a thing I find funny when people are like, oh yeah, I enjoy comedy. It's like, do you enjoy laughter and enjoyment? Of course you do. Like, no shit, you know. But like those two things were the main things. But even before that, just like just creating things that are funny. It's pretty easy for any skateboarders out there of my age. That there was the first Landspeed CKY video, and then CKY 2K.
2K.
Yeah, like with, you know, it was sketch prank stuff, pre-Jackass, you know, like all that stuff, and it was dudes with a handy cam going around their small suburban town causing trouble.
Westchester.
I came from a small.
Been there plenty of times, Jesus.
Yeah, and just being from small town Massachusetts, my friends and I were just like, oh, we can get a camera and do that stuff too. And we, you know, we didn't emulate them exactly. We tried to create our own original forms of vandalism. But yeah, those. It was always.
By the way, with these hangouts, there's always like a 1.5 second delay. So if I interrupt, I always try to catch myself and just go like, no, you go. Well, I was just going to ask, do you have any of that possibly embarrassing footage somewhere online that, because I have music that I made a decade ago that I'm like, I'll never tell you where it is, but I can't get it off of the internet.
So strangely enough, I mean, I would like to see it myself at this point, but it doesn't exist anymore because my friend Steve, he had the camera, and I would always skateboarded. He rode BMX, and my other friend Matt was a rollerblader. We overlooked that because he was a really funny guy.
I remember the war that waged between the two.
And so there was this handrail behind an elementary school, and Steve was pretty good at BMX. And so we covered it in gasoline and we lit it on fire, and he was going to just do an ice pick down. It's only a 5-stair rail.
Naturally.
And so he goes up to grind it, but just doesn't jump up high enough, catches his peg at the bottom of the rail, just eats shit super hard. And I'm dying laughing. And like the railing's still on fire. And it's like footage of him like with the wind knocked out of him trying to put the fire out, like throwing dirt at a railing, and just me laughing. Yeah, and I couldn't help him because I was laughing at him too hard. But anyway, his mother ended up finding that footage, and that tape had all of our stuff on it, and so she went and looked over it, and it was just like, yeah, you're fucked. And so she apparently did not destroy the tapes. Rumor has it she just has them, but they've moved since then, as people do 15 years after, and so I think they're lost to time. But I would like to see those. But I mean, I'm still a skinny guy, but super scrawny with like a Bic shaved head. Like I shaved my head with like a razor every like 2 days. That was just my look. And so I just looked like a weird cancer patient. And it was probably not flattering, like giant extra large skateboarding t-shirts and khaki pants and stuff. It was
14-inch khaki pants around the ankles. Oh my God.
Yeah. No, it was a hell of a time. It was a hell of a time. But yeah.
Just before the internet time, or at least before connected internet. Because we had it, but it wasn't what it is now.
Yeah, YouTube didn't exist, so
yes, exactly.
Like you
I feel like you always go. I will always stop.
All right, if you say so. This is just my hosting thing coming into play as well. Like I got to get out of the host mentality. I'm gonna just steamroll you as the guest from now on.
I love it. I would.
But yeah, pre-YouTube, like you still had to just like our thing was like, oh, we're gonna make a CKY type video and we'll get a VHS thing and we'll make copies and sell them to our friends. Like making copies of a video, like that doesn't even make sense at this point. Like if you were to tell that to like
VHS tapes.
You got like the high 8 camera that you think is like super high quality, and it's just it was all garbage. You got 2 VCRs to edit things. But yeah, it was a different time and a much more innocent time. Actually, a friend of mine, those same 2 friends, Matt and Steve, they were the rollerblader, the BMXer, and this other kid, Tom. Steve and Tom.
Sounds like a Disney movie.
Yeah. So we found a dead body down by the river. They had a school project that they had to do this one time on the Vietnam War. So all we did was put like military fatigues on and just shot each other with potato guns. And then just they submitted that and got the worst grade in the class. Just like this had
probably from all the racist Vietnamese stereotypes.
Oh yeah, I busted mine out. It was not flattering. But yeah, it was a fun, more innocent time, when you couldn't get in trouble. You think you're under 18. It's just like, I'm invincible. Arrest me, cops. What are you going to do? I'll be out in 3 days.
The amount of running from the cops that I did, if I'd gotten arrested for any of the things that I almost got arrested for, it would be the most embarrassing thing, throwing loaves of bread into the street from a bench. Or getting arrested for being with someone with drug paraphernalia. So jumping into so you have a couple of things I want to talk about: your podcast, Hard Times, and your stand-up. Which came first? Was it stand-up?
Yeah, stand-up came first. Actually, it was through listening to podcasts, like Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast, where people would ask him, Bill, I want to get into comedy. Like, what should I do? And his response is always just find an open mic and go to it. Yeah, like it's easy. And I was like, oh, right. Like, I had actually done at a fourth grade talent. So if you actually ask like, hey Bill, how long you been doing stand up? My first time was at a fourth grade talent show. So have I been doing it for 24 years?
You were 22, so it wasn't
Yeah,
exactly, you crushed those little fuckers.
I was doing crowd work, just destroying them, but like in fourth grade I just did shitty street jokes, not really, but ones that my cousin had told me, and I got kicked off the stage. But
cul-de-sac jokes,
yeah, exactly. But listening to Bill Burr's podcast or other podcasts, I can't remember exactly. There was like maybe a WTF with Brendan Walsh on it.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And he was just talking about like, I still work in a warehouse, and I've worked in warehouses. I worked in this warehouse in San Francisco, and he was just talking about doing comedy and making like $700 in a weekend and how that was low end. And I was like, holy shit, like that's my paycheck in 2 weeks, not that I can, not that I'm as funny as Brendan Walsh or could be as funny as him, but it was just one of those things like, oh, right. You don't get to that level unless you try. So just fucking find an open mic. And, but I was still super scared of it. So I was like, what if I tried improv first? Like, at least there's a group there. And so I signed up for a couple of improv classes, which, I am not a group working guy, like it did not work out for me. Like there's a lot of wacky people that do improv, and good on them. I can't do that. And also the other thing that kind of drove me insane about early improv classes, where you pay $300 for 6 weeks of improv classes, is you just have people that are showing up there like, hey, so what is your, if I were to answer honestly, like, Bill, why are you here? It's like, oh, because I have a passion for comedy and I would like to pursue this to the best of my abilities and hopefully make it some sort of viable option for a living situation at some point in the distant future. That would be great. And it's like, okay, and hey, Steven, why are you at this? Well, I just wanted to meet people on a Wednesday. It's like,
oh my God, yeah.
Like, I'm bad at talking in public and I just want to get better at it. And like, you spent $300 to be less awkward. Just get friends, fucking loser. Jesus Christ.
You're right. You don't work well as a team.
Yeah. And so I eventually signed up for my first open mic, which was at Brainwash Cafe in San Francisco. It's a very long running open mic there, and went up second to last, and it was a weird thing. My only goal for the night was, don't forget what you're going to talk about. Like, just don't forget your material. That's it. Just go up there and just don't blank out. And so 40 people signed up for this open mic. It's lasting forever, and 2 people that were their first times, they went up there and they started doing their routine, and they forgot their material and they just froze, and they were like, fuck, I'm out of here. And I was like, does this happen all that often? 2 people the first night I did comedy, that happened to. I've never seen it again happen to the level that it happened to those 2 people. And so it was stuck in my head, like, as long as you get through your shitty 3 minutes, it's a success. And maybe you gotten 1 laugh from nobody was there. They were like putting the stools up on the, flipping them over, like, we're out of here after you, kid, and it's just like,
Dude, no, yeah. I did my first open mic a month ago. My way in was podcasting. That's how I eased in the waters. They were I literally got introduced with, we all want to get the fuck out of here, so we got 1 more, let's just get through this. Anyway, go on.
I love the positivity there of the host. It sets you up. It sets you up for great success. It's like, hey, this motherfucker's the guy keeping you from going to bed tonight. So wait around for him to talk about his dick for a couple minutes. But yeah, so that first night, like I made it through the material, shaking, voice quivering, and it's like stand-up comedy was like, I've seen it so many times. Like, people do it, you're afraid of it, and some people are natural at it. I'm not that guy. And then you just get better over time from repetition. And then there's people that just quit, but it's like, I want to continue to pursue this. Like, it's a thing like skateboarding, where no matter how good you are at it, you're never going to be perfect. There's always room to grow. And I like that challenge. It's why I still skateboard. And it's why I will not stop doing stand-up comedy. It's always like, oh, well, I'm going to try this tonight. Or you enjoy the fear that goes along with it. And but it is definitely a tough thing to get over, like that first time of shit, this is going to be scary. These people are going to hate me. It's like, yeah, they do, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's definitely. I wanted to do it forever, but I was always like doing music, practically like not making money on it full time, but doing it for like the amount of time of a full time job. And a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, I think I love podcasts. And by the way, for me, getting into podcasting was listening to Bill Burr say, go do whatever open mic version of the thing you want to do is. And so just dove into that. And about a month ago, I went to this open mic just to see a friend of mine, like a guest on the podcast. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go in there, and I'm definitely not going to sign up. And then, 3 hours later, I started noticing most people had left. I was like, I'm going to sign up. I'm just going to do it and be terrified, and then like maybe never do it again. But it's like, you're right that the fear of it is really cool. Like the rush, and the thing I thought I'd hate. Granted, I've only done it 6 times, so I'm still like, I just got here. So I'm all, shining in honeymoon phase of just the idea of doing it. And looking at it like, it just, I thought the thing I'd hate the most would be having to revise the same idea over and over again. But now, like, that's the thing that I love doing. Like, I cannot wait to rip apart the garbage I had and try to put it back together based on what was working. So how long have you been doing stand-up?
I'm in my 5th year of doing. So this October will be the 5th year, I think. Or I'm in my 5th. Whatever. It was the week that Steve Jobs died. That is the week I first. It was because the world needed to laugh again.
Yeah, I gotta do it. That's what you gotta do.
Yeah, and so I have to look it up at this point. I think I'm in year 4. I did 2 years in San Francisco, 2 years in fucking Portland at this point. So yeah, not still in. I mean, some people can get good at it in 4 years and just take the world by storm, but no, that's not me. So but I'm still figuring it out, and just it's starting to come along. You get more comfortable.
It's really solid. The stuff you have on YouTube is really solid. I don't know the exact times where everything is from, but I know when was your Helium set from? That's on your YouTube page.
I think it was probably last year around this time. They do a Portland's Funniest competition like once a year, and I think it's June-ish. So yeah, it's probably 9 months old.
I think it was on that one where you did because I watched like 3, maybe 4, and you did some bit about after Google Glass, what other nerdy things are they going to make? Or things to make you look like a nerd, like Google Acne or whatever it was. I'm butchering it, but it was just, I was laughing about that for the last like handful of weeks. I was like, that's amazing. But like, it just really, it sounded great. And I know now that I know the timeline of it, I listened to the one, I think it was your last time in San Francisco, or at least that's how you were brought up before you moved to Portland.
Oh yeah.
That would have been what, 2 years ago? Yeah,
just about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I guess at this point. It would have been September of, 2013.
Well, the progression was very clear. Like I was like, that was good. And then everything I've heard since then, the other things that seem to be, in Portland, that's even better. Like it definitely sounds like it's coming together. And I've seen, even though I've been talking to comics for the last 2 years, I've talked to a lot of comics, and just in the stand-up, you are definitely at the higher end of that spectrum of people doing it 4 or 5 years that I've seen, just from my fan observation.
Well, I appreciate that.
Now, yeah, no, absolutely, it's true. Now, here's the other thing. Before I even looked at your stand-up, and before I even submitted and applied to do any writing for Hard Times, I used to love crack.com. And when I would go in there, I would find, every once in a while I started noticing a pattern of, oh, this article is something about this article, the writer is better than, whatever it is. And I started finally looking at bylines and found the same couple writers were putting out this amazing content. I felt the same way when they had all those, like, I Can Has cheeseburger sites. And then somebody came up with, Joe Mandy came up with, look at this fucking hipster. And I was like, not only do I love that site, but the captions, I was like, there's something different about this guy. This guy is operating on a whole other level. And that's what as just a fan of the Hard Times, that's what I noticed about your writing. When I would see your name in the bylines was almost 100% of the time when I'd go, this is unbelievable. Like, this is so far above and beyond what like I could even comprehend it. I was like, and then it was Bill Conway right there. I was like, oh shit, that's why. So I'm not surprised once I started getting involved and seeing, the structure of who everyone was, that you are the writer, like, which is amazing. So I'm done making you feel uncomfortable. I know good comedians cannot take compliments.
Yeah,
but I wanted to say
like
that.
if I were in the room with you right now, I'd be punching you in the face and telling you to stop. Like please.
Well, that's why I do this on Google Hangouts. Like that's
Yeah, we live right next door to each other. I don't know why we had to do it over this. I could have just walked across the street.
It's because I'm terrified of my guests. But so anyway, so moving past that, so with the hard times, if you wouldn't mind giving kind of a synopsis for listeners who maybe didn't listen to that Jesse Cannon podcast you did, how you kind of came into the fold of helping create this website, and some of the the craziness that's been happening since then.
So if you were to look at the structure of the hard times, I would be probably number 2 there, and number 1 guy is Matt Sankum, and Matt is. He has his background is in journalism, and he is a funny guy, but he does not have any comedy leanings. But he had posted on Facebook this one day, hey, I'm looking to start like a website that's like the punk rock version of The Onion, and I just replied to that like, yeah, I'm in 100%.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah, and I went to an open mic that night, and as I'm skating to the open mic, I'm just taking my phone out and just putting in headlines as I'm thinking of them, and came up with like 100 that night, and came back and was like, here's 100 headlines. And from that, Matt was like, okay, yeah, these are funny, let's and so him and I just started to work together kind of closely. This was before the website had a name. It was nothing at this point, and we're trying to figure out the direction. And I think him and our work ethic is very similar, and we're both straight edge, and that's actually how we met, was through my podcast, because he was singing in a band, Zero Progress, and I had seen like this Tumblr post that he made that I thought was really funny, and I was like, this guy, and he was doing when he was singing in that band, he played a character of the Champ, basically, which is a professional
stage
wrestler.
banter was so funny.
And so he's a very professional wrestling persona sort of thing, and I got a kick out of that, and had him on my podcast, and he basically did that persona, and I enjoyed it, and him and I sort of hit it off, but that was I had him on my podcast for like around Valentine's Day. I know it was around Valentine's Day. So it was November when he had posted that year, when he had posted about the hard time. So it was, 8 months or whatever before. And, I didn't unfollow him in my Facebook feed. Thankfully I did not, because I would have never have seen it. And so from that, we just kind of started working closer together and trying to figure out like, when we're going to launch the site, it's like, let's have our 6 best headlines that we have, and we're not going to tell anybody what this is, and then we'll just be able to put the site up. We'll have 6 articles, so it's not just, here's 1 article for you guys. We want at least 6 so people can look around a little bit, and it's not just one joke. And that was November, or I think December 13th, 2014 was the December 12th, 2014 was the first day we launched, and it got a little bit of fanfare here and there. People were posting about it. And then on Christmas, we did like a Black Flag article, and I saw that one of the singers, we made fun of that, like what was that fucking shitty album that they did? What was that one called?
That's all you. Here's my confession, by the way. I know so little about hardcore, which is what, like, I have every other part on the punk spectrum. I have this somewhat encyclopedic knowledge, but hardcore, like, I learn things every time from the writers groups. I'm like, oh, that's a thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not sure, but a shitty Black Flag.
Yeah, it was just this terrible, like the album art is garbage. It's, doesn't have the cool Black Flag feel to it. And we made fun of that album, and the singer on that album like reposted it on Facebook, like, ha ha ha, this is funny. And like, it got like 200 likes, and we're like, holy shit, something we did got 200 fucking likes on Facebook. Now, if one of our articles got 200 likes, we would delete it.
You're fired.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, we've lost it. We need to stop, And so it's been interesting to see, like, even today, today's Easter, and we last year on Easter we did a Nardwar like article, like Nardwar surprises Jesus with original Ten Commandments tablet, and so mathematically speaking, we were 4 or 5 months into being the hard times at that point, and so it did okay, but we reposted it today and it did great. Like it blew up on Twitter and it like did really good on Facebook, and it's because so many people had not seen it yet, because maybe we only had 10,000 people looking at the site, on Facebook last year. Now it's at 85,000 or something like that. And it's like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So
no, I've noticed this, how it grows so much daily. Like there's hundreds of more people, at least likewise on Facebook, that are just discovering it every single day.
yeah, it definitely has been interesting to see that growth, because we had that same idea of like, oh, nobody's gonna pay attention to this. Like, this is gonna make our friends laugh, but that's why you start doing something. Like, it's not about like, you don't start something and being like, hey, this is gonna be my ticket to the big time. It's just like, no, this sounds like a fun project. Let's work on it. And if it does work out, great. If it doesn't, oh well. You didn't waste any time. You still developed some sort of skill while you worked on it. Nothing is a waste of time. So yeah, that was. So it has been interesting to see how it has grown, and how people will message us or tweet at us and being like, I'm at a show right now and I'm looking at a guy that is a walking embodiment of a hard time story. And it's like, oh, that's crazy to think that we're in the public, like, dialogue of like, just as like a hard times article come to life. It's like, because I can't imagine if I was 16 at a show, and I see somebody with 2 beers in their hands slip and spill it on themselves, and be like, oh, it's like the fucking hard times, or something like that. But so it's cool that people like it. I'm glad that they do. Some people hate it. They can fuck off.
The hate is the funniest thing, because it's like, you get this typical like anti-satire thing where people either don't get it, or once they get it, they go, well, that's dumb. Why would you even do that? Which is the worst criticism ever. Because you're like, why would I do it? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But I really like the people who, and I hear comedians talk about this a lot, but then I actually see it, where it'll be like, somebody's like, I love this site until you made fun of the thing I liked. Now you're dead to me. It's like, all right, fine.
Yeah. No, that's I think that's one of those things that Bill Burr talks about a lot. It just like, it's like just people. I was like, oh, I said the one thing that offended you, but you didn't give a shit about the last. I
trashed everybody else. Now I trust you, and now I'm a problem. Yeah, sure, okay. Did you ever listen to total tangent? But did you ever listen to the episodes of the Uninformed podcast he did with Joe DeRosa before he started Monday Morning Podcast?
No, I hear him reference them all the time, but I've never listened to those.
I'd highly recommend it. Just the premise alone, they come up with an idea or a topic. They both talk about it. Like the example he gives us sometimes is like, they talk about how to plan, like if they were going to murder somebody, and they figure out the perfect plan to do it. And then they have an expert on the subject come in to tell them why they're wrong. It's really good. Anyway, so just to bring that up.
Great premise. That is one of those things I should definitely check that out, because like Bill Burr is a smart dude, like he plays dumb.
He can call himself dumb all he wants, but yeah, he's very smart.
Yeah, like he's operating at a different level of, able to cut into people. Like when he reads his viewer mail and listener mail, and you can tell he can get a read on people pretty quick. And it's just like,
I work in the psychology field, and I'm like, this guy, he knows it. He knows, he's catching up on these things, just knows it. Yeah. It's very Patrice O'Neill-esque, because he used to read people in 30 seconds, tell them their own life story. I'm like, Jesus. Yeah. Well, with the hard time, so now have you found that it has seeped into your world as far as stand-up or other or your podcast or other creative pursuits, or is there kind of a wall between the two?
See, that's an interesting thing. So I get, we get retweeted by some like very famous comedians every now and again. Like Jonah Ray retweets pretty.
Love Jonah Ray.
Yeah, it blows my mind, and I'm like, holy shit! And now I know that the hard times is doing well, but I also know it is a separate thing from stand up. But I sort of have it in my mind like, well, I should start taking advantage of this a little bit more. Like I am, the managing editor of this. So if you like something that's on the site, there I have looked it over. I have added jokes to it. I have taken out jokes that I did not like. I've crafted this in a way. And so basically every single thing has something to do with me on the site, and then it goes to Matt and he finalizes it, approves it, and then we post it online. And so it's like, oh, well, should I be taking advantage of this and being like, hey, I'm the guy from the fucking Hard Times and like I'm coming to LA, put me on your show? Or it's like, because I am just doing open mics in Portland, and there's this weird in lately, I'm 2 years. When I was in San Francisco, it took 2 years for me to start getting booked on shows, like kind of regularly. And then I moved away from San Francisco, and then now I'm in Portland, and it's taken me 2 years to start getting booked on shows. But I don't know if that's just my normal. If I were to move to Omaha, would it take me 2 years to start getting booked on shows again? I don't know. But so now, and I don't know if that has a direct correlation with the Hard Times or what, but I also know just I host an open mic here at a very rough, like it's a vegan punk bar, and it's very rough. Like it's the crowd is what you would expect from a vegan punk bar. If there is a crowd at all, it's an open mic. So if there's a crowd at all, they are punk and they are vegan. Therefore, they do not laugh or care.
So like if it's just comics, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And so that has helped me with like doing comedy. It's like, oh, right. Nothing fucking matters. Just fucking do your shit and just try your best to make it funny and just have fun with it. And that has made my stand-up, I feel, a lot better just because it's given me a comfort level. Like I'm, when I go to my Monday open mic or Tuesday open mic, I'm not nervous going up anymore. I'm just like, fuck it, whatever. This is not going to be worse than what's going to happen to me at my own open mic on Thursday. This is going to be a breeze. And so, but to answer if there is like a correlation, I can't really say. I know there is this weird perception like of maybe some of newer comedians in Portland that just start, maybe they're a year in and I've already been here 2 years, and they see the Hard Times and they're like, oh, Bill's got it made. But this person gets booked on 3 or 4 more showcases a week than I do. I'm like, well, you're doing way more, paid stand-up gigs than I am. Like, and that's not like, oh, well, this guy, and this is me, not trying to sound bitter or anything, but it's like, and if we were to be on the same show, like I would be better at this than you. I've just been it's a numbers game. I've been doing it longer. I have more material that I've worked out, and it's not a talent thing per se, but also I don't play the game well as far as comedy. I'm a straight edge guy. I go to bars and I'm like, I'm gonna be in the corner, fuck this. And it's like, hey, we're going drinking after this. Like, I'm going to bed. See you later. So that's just how I am. But yeah, so if it has been opportunities that have come through the Hard Times where like people are like, hey, Bill, you want to do stand up on this punk show? Like in April, I'm doing stand up before a hardcore show in Seattle, so that will be interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, there was this past, and this may not be the best like venue for it, but last year my band played one date of Warped Tour, so I found myself at Warped Tour, and they had a comedy stage.
I did 2 dates there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Well, that actually makes sense to me because, well, for us, which is in Baltimore area, they had a bunch of comics from, I guess, the Laugh Button, I think, was who was booking it, at least for that leg. And they were just comics in their mid-20s talking about going to bars and picking up like dates on the internet. And they were playing to a bunch of like teenage punk kids, or not metal kids, or just like, trend kids. And it was stuff like I couldn't believe, because I was like, how, at the time I wasn't involved in Hard Times at all, but I was such a huge fan. I was like, how have they not figured out that if you're going to do this, you pick people from the place that's doing comedy in that world? Like, it's so specific and so perfect. So how did those gigs go for you? That's amazing you did that.
Yeah, so I had a friend that ran the acoustic stage, and like, like a friend of a friend, I was just like, hey, tell him to get me the email of the guy that runs the the comedy thing. And I emailed them and was like, hey, when you're running through Portland, I'd love to be on it, and they're like, yeah, come by. And if you can do the Seattle show, we'll put you on that too. I was like, oh, that's great. And so what you're saying there, so with the Warped Tour starts on the East Coast, comes to the West Coast. So you saw those guys, and it was probably Grant Cotter, Eli Olsberg. Were probably
I know it was Grant Cotter. I have his card upstairs. Yeah, I want to get him on here to talk about the hell gigs that were the Warped Tour.
So I was talking with them like, hey, how has this been going? And they're like, we've figured it out now. And, so it took them a while. Like, I bet they started doing their material, but then when I was on my so it was two shows a day, and I was on 2 gigs. My first show, I'm just doing material as a band is playing 60 feet behind you at
double kick drums.
Yeah, it's like I'm competing with Pierce the Veil, whoever they are. And you have, and the only benefit of the comedy tent is this is a shaded place that has a fan, so you just have like people that are borderline sunstroke coming in just to get away from everything. And so you do your material and nobody's paying attention. And I would see what those
they leave before the punchline.
Yeah,
I've seen people walk in for the setup and then peace out for the punchline.
Right. Yeah, they kind of look and they go, well, I don't want the comedian to talk to me, and then they turn around and walk away. But what those guys were doing by the time they got to the West Coast was basically just carnival barking and just riffing. They would jump in and out of material a little bit, but they were basically just being like, hey, you have stupid hair, like stuff like that. And then just like, pointing it out and getting laughs off of that. It was very little prepared material.
Yeah.
And over the course of 4 shows that I did, by the 4th one, I was like, oh, this was the first one I got laughs at. Like the 4th one is like, because I started to tailor it to like, oh, I see what these guys are doing. I'm not going to rip them off, but I'm going to at least, because I have material about being straight edge or whatever that is kind of unique to being a subculture that might a 14-year-old might know about, or something like that. But and then there was this one comedian, Eric Schwartz, that would like close it out every day, and he just basically did like raps, like it was like parody songs, and he killed. And I mean, super nice guy, not my style of humor at all, but like he would just kill because it was goofy and silly, and it's 15 year old.
You could see it right on YouTube. It would be kind of like in that vein.
Exactly. And what the weird thing about Warped Tour is so you got young people, 14, 15, 16, but then you skip up to 40, 41 because it's the parents bringing their kids, and parents are fucking lame, and so they want that goofy material, and so they really enjoy that too. And so it's like, oh, so you have dad humor and you have humor that like appeals to their kids. And he did well, and good on him. I wish him nothing but the best. It's not my style of comedy, but what he did was different and definitely made people laugh. But it was one of those things like, if you were to go to a comedy club, and he was the feature act, I don't see him doing great, depending on
it's adapting to the setting. And I'm actually really glad you told me that. Like, I felt so bad for every comic there, because it was like the entire festival was heckling them essentially, and they weren't calling attention to anything. So to know that they finally were like, nope, it's just, this is what it is relieving, to say the least. So speaking of, before we have to go, I want to talk about, so your podcast, Edgeland, could you describe that for us? And I definitely want to ask you some stuff about straight edge. I didn't have a drink or anything until I was 23. So like my high school and college experience, the time where like those kind of things are a staple in everyone's, not just life, but identity. Like I definitely relate to whenever I've heard, I believe, an episode or 2 of your podcast. It was a while ago. Like I definitely got fascinated by the hard times, like etc. Well, anyway, but like when I heard some of the straight edge stand up stuff you did, I was like, oh shit, someone's actually talking about that. Like I totally remember those feelings. So if you wouldn't mind describing the podcast, and then yeah.
Yeah, so Edgeland, so everybody has a podcast these days. There was the Senate passed that law where it required anybody that's somewhat interested in comedy to make their own podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, what do I know about? I know about being straight edge, so I want to talk with people that are straight edge. And originally the format, it's kind of changed a little bit because it's hard to get guests. But it was, one straight edge person, one person that used to be straight edge on an episode, two separate interviews. They weren't debating or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so, I was kicking around that idea, and so I started reaching out to people. And one of the first people I reached out to was this guy Mark McCoy, who sang in Charles Bronson, Das Oath, Failures currently, and Charles Bronson was a band that in my development they were a power violence band that also had like a lot of humor, and their aesthetic is something that I still rip off to this very day.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's burned in my brain. And so he said, yes, I'll do the podcast. And I was like, well, there we go, and like the person that was the edge break part of that episode was the drummer of a different power violence band, Spaz, which were like, so if you were to take Charles Bronson and Spaz, like those two bands equal up to like One Minor Threat as far as my influence in my life. So like these guys agreed to do it, and so then I was like, all right, well now I have to keep going. And so I just talk with people about, it's a conversation about how you got into being straight edge, and then it just becomes, that's kind of almost like how did you get into being punk, like that's sort of just a stand-in for that. And then people that broke edge, it kind of talks about like, so what's up, like is it better not being straight edge? And the answer most of the time is like, you're not missing anything. Like
I relate to that. Was the first time I actually drank, I was like, oh, this is the big deal that everyone said. I was like, oh, that's the dumbest thing. But I also felt like on both hands, I was like, this is not a big deal. But I was also like, oh, but it's also not a big deal that I was making it out to be forever. And it was just like, you do what you do. And like, that's it. I don't know. It's a really fascinating podcast. Do you always have that format? Or do you just sometimes have, one or the other or whatever?
At this point, it's gotten down to I'll just have one or the other, because booking 2 people a week got way too tough, and I noticed like an hour interview is just better. Just having one person and kind of sitting down with them a little bit longer, because a lot of times with the 30 minutes, it's like I get to 30 minutes, I'm starting to look at the clock to wrap it up, and I'm like, he's just getting to the good stuff, fuck. And so. And so now I do an hour or so, and it's, weekly, comes out as much as I can. It's been hitting some hiccups lately just because of the hard times. This kept me very busy. I still have a day job that sucks up way too much of my goddamn time. And then comedy at night, it's like having 3 jobs, and then the podcast being like a 4th part-time job. It's like, God damn it. To try to get everything done in a week. It's like, it's almost good though, because Friday comes and I'm like, oh, good, it's already Friday again, and it's the weekend, as opposed to just having nothing to do. And I'm like, it's Monday, and I'm going to be stuck at work. So it's like I'm always behind a deadline that I impose on myself. Like it's like the stupidest thing.
The amount of times I freak out about not getting a podcast up on time, when literally there's only maybe 200 people who actually give a shit. And most of them probably are like, we can wait. We're not clamoring. We'll check it out on time. It's not a big deal. I totally feel it. Now, the thing with I meant to bring this up earlier, because you had mentioned with hard times, it's kind of like you're like, should I, go and say, I am the head writer, or whatever, however you want to phrase that, for this really popular site. Can you like put me on your gig? And so it's kind of hard to like how you figure out how to market yourself. And like you said, you host an open mic at a place that is in the same general subculture that you're involved in. Like what the best thing, more attention was paid than any of the music I made over 15 years was to a series of articles I did on how to build a local fan base. And so I'm always trying to connect, like with comedy and music, how to build a fan base of music and use those skills to figure out how to make it work in comedy. And like, so I'm curious, do you ever have, with that in mind, do you ever have, sorry, let me back up. I speak way too fast and have 17 things going on at once. With that in mind, I feel like the audience for the Hard Times, because that's a great credit to have, is the Hard Times is a great credit, but it's so much bigger in alternative culture than it is in comedy culture. So with that in mind, your, to use lame industry terms, your target audience is a lot of times for what you can, you know, market yourself as working with the Hard Times, is these alternative kids who aren't necessarily going to see stand-up, but they might see stand-up if it's in the realm that you're delivering it in via the Hard Times. With that in mind, do you ever have an interest in trying to do some kind of Hard Times offshoot that involves your stand-up?
So, you know, it kind of in a way. So I've back in December, so there's this alternative comedy space in Portland, which, you know, keep Portland weird, man. Everything's alternative, you know. So there's this just alternative space. It's like an improv it's based thing. It's in an old Chinese English language classroom sort of place on the second floor of this building. And this guy asked, like, hey, would you want to do like a Hard Times, you know, promoted stand-up comedy showcase? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, and what are you thinking? He's like, well, I was thinking what would be cool is you could have like stand-ups on it, but then maybe like have a dude doing a character as like a Hard Times article, you know, like one of the people that might be the subject of the fake article, someone comes up and does stand up as that person. I was like, that's a really good idea. So back in January, I started doing this comedy showcase called, you know, ACAB, All Comics Are Bastards. And it happens at this thing. And like you said, the target base isn't really people that are going to comedy clubs. So the first show was packed out, you know, it's a 40-seat thing, and there was people standing in the back, and I was just looking around, and it's like, these aren't people that I could see going to the comedy clubs. These are, you know, punk dudes and ladies that maybe this is their first time. Maybe this is their first time seeing live stand-up comedy, you know, like, so it's an interesting thing. And then the second show went well. The third show went well. I got the fourth one coming up in 2 weeks on April 13th. And it's been fun. Like the first show I had my friend Jordan do basically the character from the article, Nothing Really Offends Me, says walking embodiment of white privilege. So
that was a great one.
he just basically went up there as a super stuck up, like rich white kid. And like one of his jokes was like, he wrote all these jokes specific for this character, and they were so funny. But one of them that I remember was like, why do people always get, you know, so mad when a cop pulls you over? Like, just tell them who your dad is and they let you go. You know?
That's actually a good joke, even if you're just being ironic. Like, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, so yeah, that's been an interesting kind of crossover because, you know, I'll have like a character every show, the stand-up comedians, and there's a lot to choose from in Portland that are kind of alternative. Like the first headliner I had is this local guy, Jason Traeger, who I've had on my podcast before. And he's got this super interesting life. He's a super funny stand-up comedian, but he dropped out of high school to tour with 7 Seconds. He worked for Alternative Tentacles for years. So like, if as far as punk rock credibility, there's nobody in Portland that has more than this guy, you know. And he's also a super funny stand-up comedian. And so it's like, this is, if I could have him headline every show, I would, you know, because he's just perfect for it. It's the perfect crossover. But yeah, that's been a really fun thing to do. And it kind of melds like the two worlds, because, you know, you bring a character, and it's kind of funny to have the audience, if they're tuned into like the Hard Times, and then they sort of realize like, oh, it's this guy. Like, I know that article. I read that article, and you can feel like the room sort of change. Like, oh, I get it. And it makes the jokes more relatable because everybody's on the same page, you know? And so it's not just like, oh, I got to convince you guys to find this funny. It's like, we already know this is funny, and now we're getting additional jokes in this intimate setting.
That's cool. I knew you did those shows just from seeing the posts on Facebook. I didn't get the hook or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's really cool that you incorporate it in that way. Well, that's awesome. Well, hey, thank you again so much for coming on. I could talk to you forever, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. Tell us where we can find, I mean, you know the hardtimes.net, but where we can find your stand-up, your Twitter, all that stuff, anything you want to promote. And I'll be putting this up in the next few days, so any shows are coming up. I might have a few people out in Portland. I think I do have a few people I know in Portland who listen, so you know, it could be worth it. You can address them by name even and tell them to come out.
Yeah. If they don't show up, I'm gonna march over to their houses and pound the shit out of them. That's what's gonna happen. But yeah, so there's the hardtimes.net. That's you know, there's a new post every day over there. You can follow it on Facebook. You know, retweet it. You know, share it on Facebook. We see it and we like it when everybody does that. There's edgelandpodcast.com. That is my weekly podcast. If you are straight edge or used to be straight edge, you might find it enjoyable. And also on the hardtimes.net/live-events. I think at this point we have like a calendar of Hard Times promoted like shows. The Hard Times is partnered up with this guy Nick Bain, a Bay Area promoter who's, you know, brought Judge to Gilman and stuff like that, and a lot of great shows. And there's listed, you know, the hardcore shows we're putting on, and it's got my comedy calendar on there for the ACAB shows. The next one is April 13th, and then this one in Seattle on April 23rd, which will be good. And then whatever other little dates I have around the city, you know, just talking about how my butt is big and how my face looks like a butt, you know.
I haven't heard those bits. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, no, it's rock solid material. But yeah, that's basically it. Edgelandpodcast.com and the hardtimes.net is where basically anything that I'm involved in is that's what I've got. Those are the pies my fingers are fully in at this point.
All right, excellent. Well, to those listening, go to all of Bill's stuff, and then when you're done that, if you want more podcasts from me, you go to erictriestoohard.com, Eric Tries Too Hard on YouTube, Eric Tries Too Hard on Facebook, and Eric Tries on Twitter. You said you know about, you know, straight edge, so you did a podcast about what you know about. I try way too hard to make people like me, so that's hence what I do. But thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I meant all the things I said about your writing. You're a fantastic writer, and people should check Bill Conway's comedy out. And I will catch you on the internets. And if you ever want to come on again to promote anything, or we do these group casts where we just have a bunch of comics talking about whatever, please let me know, because I'd love to have you back.
Eric, thank you so much.
No problem. Have a great night, man.
All right, you too. Talk to you later.